Good morning, church family. Sorry, I'm already emotional. Good grief. Kind of like Aaron, Ann and I haven't been here as well. We've missed some weeks, and we haven't gone crazy either. I was actually in Elk City as well for a couple of weeks and covering for Pastor Joe Thompson there while he was on vacation and on sabbatical. So I was out there. Mark Campbell, he came up to me and he says, "Where have you been?" I said, "I've been preaching these other churches." He goes, "Oh, what are you doing? Trying to find a church that wants to hear you?" And I thought, thanks a lot, Mark. That's just real funny. Thanks, Mark. Where is Mark? I appreciate it. But anyway, no, he's a good friend of mine. And we need that I need that kind of stuff. But anyway, we'll talk about the verse a little bit in the first today. And yeah, the children's church can go to children's. Some of them have already left. If you haven't left, you can feel free to go to children's church. But Jesus said, "You must love the Lord your God with all your heart and with all your soul and with all your mind." So I'm going to talk about that last phrase today, with all your mind. You know, in our society today, it is easy to say that we love the Lord with all our mind, but it's harder to do. Because whether we like it or not, we're impacted by our society. Our society affects us, whether we think it does or not, to some degree and somewhere. It affects us, and our society is always trying to affect us. The world is always trying to affect us, and of course, who is behind the things of the world is Satan. Satan is always trying to affect us. So I was raised in the Church of God. You know, when I was a little kid, it was called the Church of God. That's the way we actually said it. I had to put emphasis on it. And so just so you'll know, Fresh Start Community Church is a Church of God. It is a Church of God that is on the approved list of congregations for the Oklahoma Assembly of the Church of God in Oklahoma, and then we are also a part of the national work, which is the Church of God of Anderson, Indiana. That's where our headquarters at. And the reason I say that is it's important to know, because if you get on the internet and you put in Church of God's, it's going to bring you about 500 different types. And so with that, we have our sets, of theological beliefs. We have 16 principles that we hold to. We expect theological principles that we expect the congregations to hold to. Ministers are held accountable to those and so forth. So I was raised in the Capitol, or in Church of God, but specifically the Capitol Hill Church of God, 3120 South Harvey. And there's some people here that went there with me, and we were raised there. And they taught us a lot of things. They taught us a lot of good things. But they taught us a lot of things. They taught us a lot of don'ts. We had a huge list of things not to do, And it was a big list, and it was hard to carry around, young people. It was kind of like I had this list. I had to carry it on my shoulders, and never don't do this and don't do that. We had some things we could do, though. Go to church, go to Sunday school, go home and pray. That's about it. The rest of it is don't. Don't do anything else but that. I'm exaggerating. I'm just kidding. But they taught us a lot of things, but some things they taught us not only that you shouldn't do those things, but they taught us why we shouldn't do them. That's very important. As a minister, or anybody here as a minister or a preacher, a teacher, when you tell people from what the Word says not to do things, it's important to tell them why, okay? Let me give you an example. When I was a little kid, about 8 or 9 years old, we used to have Tuesday night youth meetings. We went to Tuesday night, and one night they were going to talk about why you shouldn't smoke cigarettes. Well, they had this guy come in. I don't remember his name. He didn't go to our church, but he came in there, and he was going to talk about the dangers of cigarettes. And he had this little machine on this table, and it had these 2 big glass jars. And inside those jars, he had this white kind of fibrous material in there. And he had them hooked to all these little tubes and hoses, and they went down to these little motors and these little pumps, and then it came up over here to this little mouthpiece. I kid you not. The guy pulls out a cigarette in the Church of God. I'm telling you. This is back in the 60s. And the guy pulls a cigarette out of his pocket. We're all going, He sticks that cigarette in that little mouthpiece of that machine. I kid you not again. He lights the thing. He lights it up, and we're all going, no, this is church. You don't do those kind of things. You don't even think that, So he lights the machine. He lights the cigarette. He hits the machine, and the crazy machine starts smoking the cigarette, taking air into those lungs and the cigarette smoke, and then blowing it out. And so while that machine was doing that, he went in and talked about why you shouldn't smoke cigarettes from health reasons, and all kinds of things. Well, while he was doing that, the little machine was smoking cigarettes, and it turned that white stuff, it started turning it brown. It started staining it.
So then he comes back while he talked the whole time, and that inside of those jars, which simulate the human lungs, that's what that was supposed to be. The jars represented the lungs, and the machine was you breathing in and out. And they got darker and darker. So he goes, well, hey, here's another deal. He pulls out he had a little table with a curtain in front of him. He pulls out this other identical machine. He goes, I've been using this one in demonstrations like this for 9 months, and the inside of the lungs were black from those cigarettes. And so I sat there and I went, I ain't going to be smoking those cigarettes. But you know what? I didn't say I wasn't going to smoke cigarettes because they told me I shouldn't. I didn't say I was going to not smoke cigarettes because I was a good little Church of God boy. I just thought I'm not going to smoke cigarettes because what I saw it do to that machine. And I said, I don't want that to happen to my lungs. So I had a why of why I shouldn't do things. Likewise, they went on. They taught us about alcohol, drinking alcohol, and why we shouldn't drink alcohol, and how it can become like cigarettes. It's very habitual. It can take over your life. It can make you do things that you normally wouldn't do. So I said, okay, I'm not going to drink. And so then they talked to us about gambling. They talk you shouldn't gamble because it's addicting and it can ruin your life and all these things. And they taught us about that, and they tied that in to the verse in Galatians 5, I think I'm saying that right, chapter 5, 19, where Paul lists all the works that are sin. He starts out with sexual immorality, fornication, adultery, and all these, and he goes down through these other things, gossiping, lying, stealing, all these kind of things. But at the end of that, and he says, and things like these, which meaning things that are like these that aren't, because cigarettes isn't listed in the Bible. You can't find cigarettes in the Bible. But it's a thing like those other things that will hurt you. So when God is telling us not to do things, and Christ is telling us not to do things, he's not being condemning. Like I've heard preachers, man, Kenny, you don't smoke cigarette, you'll go to hell. And how they used to be scathing about it. Not only they say, would you go to hell, they'd say you're going to hell in a race car with no brakes. That's what they used to say, But Jesus, when you look at Jesus' life, he never did that to anybody. He was never scathing. He was never condemning. And I'm 62 years old, and when I first gave my heart to the Lord, and ever since then, which I was saved when I was a little kid, a little Church of God boy, But later, when I was about 18, is really when I gave my heart to the Lord. And so from there to now, I'm 62, the Lord has showed me all kinds of things in my life that I needed to get out of my life, make corrections, change. And he never did it in a condemning way. He never said, what were you thinking? Why did you do that? He said, Kenny, come back to me. I know you all know what I'm talking about. I know everyone in here has felt that from Jesus because he does that to every person. Nobody has the exclusive rights to that. So today I want to talk about one thing in particular, and several things. In the church, they told us, other things they told us not to do. They told us that we shouldn't commit adultery. That's in the 10 Commandments. But they didn't tell us why. They told us we shouldn't commit fornication. But they didn't tell us why. I went a long time till I was a teenager before I even knew what fornication was. They just said, don't do it. Well, what? Just don't do it. I finally had to ask somebody. So I'm going to tell the young people today. I'm not going to get real graphic today, but I'm going to talk. The young people need to know fornication in the Bible, what it basically kind of means is sex between two individuals before they're married. They finally told us that in church. That's one thing of it. It's more broader than that. Of course, adultery, I think we all know what that is. Sex between a man and a woman outside their bonds of their marriage. And Jesus said not to do that. Sexual immorality falls in that, but these are kind of umbrella words that cover a lot of sins. The word pornography, the word pornography is not in the Bible. It is in essence, but the word's not in there. They told us we shouldn't look at, they didn't use the word pornography. Back then, we'd call them girly magazines. That's about all they were. But that was, that's only one type of pornography. But young people, they didn't tell us why. And today, I'm here to tell the young people, but all of us, why we should not view pornography, but other things that hurt us a little bit. There is a word in the Greek, in the original writings, and if I can say this right, Pastor Wendell Sutton, I think I'm saying it right. I'm not a Greek scholar, but it goes like it's porneia. That is a Greek word that we can translate into adultery, sexual immorality. It's kind of a catch-all for all kinds of sexual immorality. It is in the New Testament 25 times. In the gospel, in the original Greek. In the Gospels, Jesus uses it about 11 times when he talks about these things. And so today that we look at that. So today, we've got a question. Don't have to answer, just think about it. Is pornography a sin? Should a Christian's view pornography? Well, we're going to talk about that a little bit. What we need also, when we think about pornography, when we hear that word today, some people automatically start thinking, well, that's a guy, that's a man, or that's some boy, and they're off somewhere looking at their phone or looking at their computer and looking at pornography. Wrong. Incorrect. Pornography worldwide today is a multi-billion-dollar business. Statistics show that the women using pornography is increasing at an alarming rate besides men. It is not just a man thing, but it is dangerous. And I'm going to here tell you why, and then I'm going to tell you I'm not saying anybody's, I want to be clear, I'm not saying anybody here is looking at it. I want to be really clear. The other thing I want you to understand is say if you are, and you come to me after church and say, well, Kenny, I've been viewing pornography, I want to get out of it. Here's what I want you to understand. If you tell me that, I'm going to help you. I'm also not going to look any different on you than I looked before I knew that. You are still the same person. You are still my friend. You are a good person that needs to be helped out of a bad thing. You are not a bad person. Just like that song we sung when it says, I'm helpless, I'm worthless, I'm weak. You are who God says you are. But if you're caught in something like pornography, but it can be anything else. Lust is in the Bible, but lust in the Bible doesn't primarily mean sexually. It can be the lust of money, hoarding money. It can be your job. It can be the pride of life. It can be the lust of clothes, your house, your cars, your lands, everything, whatever you might have. You can lust after those things. And sexuality has nothing to do with that. But I'm going to talk about pornography kind of specifically. I'm not going to describe pornography, but we need to say what it is. Pornography of any kind, whether it is sexually suggestive still images, cartoons that have that in them, strip clubs, sexually explicit videos, novels, magazine articles, on your phone, social media, wherever that is, has pornography. It doesn't matter if your husband's okay with it or your wife's okay with it. God's not okay with it. And I'm not trying to be condemning. I'm not trying to hurt anyone here. I am trying to help. And I'm just going to be honest. Young people, when I was your age, when they told us not to look at, they didn't use the word pornography, but those kind of things, I wish they'd have told me the why. I needed to know the why in my life. And I wish I would have had it. First, we need to also understand a man or a woman contributing to pornography in any way is sinning against God. If I look at pornography in any form, I need to understand that I am sinning against God. Our minds are very, very powerful things. Very powerful. We can create so many stories in our minds. We can make up stories. We can tell ourselves stories. We can tell ourselves what is reality when it's not reality. We have to be very careful. Remember what happened to Adam and Eve when they were in the garden and they ate of the fruit of knowledge of good and evil? All of a sudden they go, hey, we're naked. We don't have any clothes on. And they went around, but this is the reason I'm saying, I'm not trying to make fun of it, but they went and they took fig leaves and they sewed them together and made kind of some coverings for their body. You ever stop to think of it? There was nobody else around. God was, but there was no other people. But they knew they were naked. Now they broke through and they knew that they needed to cover their nakedness. Okay? Leviticus 18 verse 9. I'm not going to read all that. It's pretty graphic. I would invite you to go home and read it and pray up and look at it. But there's one phrase that I need you to grasp out of verse 9 that it talks about why this leads to pornography or why we shouldn't engage or any kind of nudity in any kind of situation. In the King James Version, it uses these words which in the end of that verse. It says, even their nakedness thou shalt not uncover. But what that means in context to his whole chapter means you should not uncover, or they should not uncover their nakedness for you or you for them in a sexual manner. That's what God is talking about. He's not talking about if you work in the health industry or you're a doctor or a nurse. He's not talking about that kind of stuff. It says if you do it for sexual reasons. He says we're not to do that. Now, I also need to explain, sex is not bad. God is not against sex. I remember one time when I think I was like 15 or 16, something like that. We had this man that came, we used to have camp meetings back there at Capitol Hill. This man named Dr. Boyce Blackwelder. I don't know if any of you ever heard of him or heard him. And at that time, he was one of the greatest, known as one of the greatest preachers in the Church of God. He was talking about sex. And of course, when you're about 16, he started bringing it, got my attention. I'm locked in. He goes like this. He goes, sex is wonderful. Sex is beautiful. So every time he said that, he goes, sex is wonderful. I went, and you're in the Church of God. You can't say that kind of thing. He goes, sex is beautiful. He goes, what are you doing? You're killing me. But he did it for a reason. He wanted us to understand in the Church of God at that time, still is in some places, which was highly legalistic, that there's nothing wrong with sex between a man and woman in the parameters of marriage. And and I'm going to be kind of explicit, but I think I kind of have to, because our world is throwing it at our faces. On TV and social media, they're throwing it at you all the time. So it's better if we need to hear it right from the church and from the Word of God. I mean, wouldn't you agree? So Jesus said himself, he said, have you not heard? Have you not read that God himself made male and female? The man will leave his mother and cling to his wife. They will no longer be two. They will be one. That's mentally, spiritually, and physically. So when you're married, when you're together, young people, someday when you get married, sex in that parameter is perfectly all right. And we need to understand that. Outside of that, God does not want us to do that or to view that. So sex is meant for us, but in those parameters. But the Bible also warns us that sexual immorality, also translated as fornication, which comes directly from the word porneia, if we view that, I'll just put it this way. Maybe this will help you a little bit, make it a little more palatable, a little more easy for you to digest. If I look at things like that, whether that's magazines, videos, even movies that are made in Hollywood, if they've got nudity in there, you need to stay away. I need to stay away from them. If they, even though you say, well, yeah, they were nude, but I didn't really see anything, doesn't matter. If they're engaging in some kind of sexual behavior, the Lord says, do not uncover their nakedness. Do not do that. It would lead me to pain and suffering. 1 Corinthians 6:18, Paul wrote these. I'm reading from the New Language Translation today. It says about the same thing in the King James, but it's very hard to understand. It's very hard to grasp the meaning because it's not in our vernacular like we talk today. Paul says it this way. He says, run from sexual sin. No other sin so clearly affects the body as this one does. For sexual immorality, porneia, there that word is again in the Greek, is a sin against your own body. Jesus and God and the Apostle Paul, they weren't telling us to condemn you. They wasn't telling us to condemn us, make us feel bad, make us look down on ourselves, say, I'm worthless, I'm trapped in this, I'm worthless, I can't. No, it's so you can come to God and God can deliver you and God can help you, God can rescue you. That's what he's saying these things for. Run from it. Pornography falls under the basic category of sin that all humans experience. The lust of the eyes. We've all experienced that at some other time in our life. And they're not of God, but they're of the world, which is of Satan. 1 John 2:16. It says, for all that is in the world, the lust of the flesh, the lust of the eyes, the pride of life. People can just be prideful in living. I mean, we're all proud to be alive. I don't mean that. But I mean, people can become hedonistic, self-serving. It's all about me. I want. Those things are not of the Father, but they are of the world. And then Jesus also spoke in a way about pornography in these verses, Matthew 5:27 through 28. He said, "You have heard that it was said by them of old time, Thou shalt not commit adultery. But I say to you that whosoever looketh on a woman to lust after her hath committed adultery already with her in her heart." Now, I need to be really clear. I've heard one person tell me this a long time ago. Well, he was talking to the men. He wasn't talking to the women. I said, wrong. That's just how they communicated back then. Because initially they taught the men first, and the men were to go home and teach the women. So you could easily said, "Thou shalt not commit adultery, but I say to you that whosoever looketh on the man to lust after him hath committed adultery with him already in her heart." You can put it that way. But you can see what Jesus is getting at. Again, he's not trying to be condemning. He's not trying to hurt. He's trying to help us love him with all of our mind. And so if we have other things, not just pornography, but lust of any kind that gets in the way, and we're not, I will put it this way, if that gets in the way, I'm not loving the Lord with all my mind. As Christians, we must guard our eyes against every perversion and lewdness. We should not feed them pornography or sexually suggestive images. Psalms 101, verse 3, "I will set no wicked thing before mine eyes. I hate the work of them that turn me aside. It shall not cleave to me." So we need to do that. I've also had, I can't tell you too much in where I used to, before I retired and where I used to work, I had kind of this conversation a lot in certain situations. But anyway, some people have the incorrect thinking that looking at pornography is no big deal. I need to back up just a little bit to the kids, the young people. You know, when Jesus said to look after a woman and to lust after her, or if that's a guy doing that to a girl or a girl doing that to a guy, I need young people to understand. That's not like saying, you know, I might be walking down the street and I say, "Man, that lady's attractive." That's not what he's talking about. He's talking, or a woman here today said, "Man, that guy's attractive." That's not what he's talking about. It's if you take it further, if in your mind. If you say, "Well, that lady's attractive and I'd like to do this, I'd like to be that, I would like to be with her, or I would like to have sexual relations with her," then Jesus said, if I do that, then I've already committed adultery in my heart and my mind. And if I'm doing that, I'm not loving the Lord with all my mind. So I wanted the young people to be clear, because, you know, if you see somebody that's good looking, that's not, and you say, "Man, they're attractive," and even if you said, "I'd like to date them," that's not what Jesus is talking about. He's talking about if our thinking goes to immoral things. So some people have said, "It's no big deal." I've had a person tell me this one time. You don't know them. They don't go to this church. You know, doesn't matter. They said, "I don't think pornography is wrong. I don't think there's anything wrong with it." And I said, "Well, I mean, you're free to think that. But it does hurt us. It hurts us as individuals, and it hurts." And then some people say, "Well, I can look but don't touch." If you look too much and don't touch, you're doing what Jesus said. Somebody said, "Well, I can touch but I don't taste." No, that's incorrect. Because if we do those, I'll put it this way to help you out, hopefully. If I do those things, then it breeds lust, and lust gets more powerful and more powerful and more powerful. It will build in your life. That's not Kenny telling you that. That's the Bible telling you that. James 1:14 through 15. I'm going to read it this way for us today. "But every person is tempted when they are drawn away from their own lust and enticed. Then when lust hath conceived, it bringeth forth sin. And then when sin, when it is finished, brings forth death." Now, I'll be real clear. I'm not going to get into this real deeply. We can experience spiritual death here on earth. But the real spiritual death is if we never made ourselves right before God and we go to hell, then there is no avenue to come back to God. But as long as we're living, we always have the opportunity to come to God, ask him to forgive us, ask him to help us. I always have the opportunity to come to God, ask him to help me, ask him to forgive me, ask him to deliver me from whatever. As long as you're living, you'll never lose hope. Never lose hope in that. I don't want you to ever forget that. Galatians 6, 7, and 8. Paul wrote, be not deceived, God is not mocked. For whatsoever a man sows, that he will also reap. For if a man sows to his flesh or to immorality, and the flesh, he says, he will reap corruption, meaning pain, suffering, hurt. But then he goes on, but he that soweth, of the person that sows to the Holy Spirit shall reap, of the Holy Spirit shall reap life everlasting. My friends, pornography does hurt other people. You know, I'm proud of my kids. Well, I say my kids. They're not kids anymore. They got their own kids, but I call them kids. But we hold each other accountable on movies that we see. We've made a decision. I hope you don't look down on me like this. But we made a decision. We don't go to any R-rated movies anymore unless we've really looked at them closely. I mean, you can look at a description of any movie and it'll tell you what's in it. And so if it has like sexual theme, nudity, sexual innuendo, sexual connotation, I go, we're not going. Why are we not going? Even me and my kids. Because I'm a good little Church of God boy? No, because I'm going to be honest. Because I don't want to be tempted. I don't want it to drag me down again like it did when I was a teenager. I don't want to get trapped again anymore. Ann and I were going to go see a movie. I don't even remember what it was. Doesn't even matter. I can't remember the name. It was a while back. I said, well, Ann and I were going to go see this. My daughter Leslie says, well, Dad, what are you doing? I said, what do you mean? She goes, well, I looked that movie up. It's got nudity and it's got sex in it. I said, okay, we're not going because we've had that agreement with that. So it's the reason I'm saying that is if you struggle with things in your life, it's not that you have to tell the whole world, but it's good to tell somebody close around you that you trust because they can help keep you accountable. They can help keep you walking down the path, and they won't condemn, and then they won't judge. But back to when people say pornography doesn't hurt anybody. Well, from the scriptures we just read, from the Old Testament and the New Testament, it does. So to help it again to be a little more palatable and a little more easy for you to digest, I'll use myself, okay? But again, when I'm saying this, my intent today is to, if somebody needs help and rescue out of that or out anything else, I'm here to help you. And Pastor Bryant, Pastor Peg, all the pastors we have here, several of you in the church want to help. And we won't think any different of you. The worst thing that Satan can get you to do is really can hide your secrets. I'm not saying tell everybody, but as long as you keep them hidden, they do more damage. They eat on you. They gnaw away at you. But when you tell somebody else, that's when the chains start breaking. The Lord uses that, and he helps you move away from it. But here back, what I was going to say. Use myself as an example. If I view pornography, I'm hurting 4 people from what we just read in the Bible. Number 1, the first person I hurt is God, because I'm sinning against him. He has saved me. He has cleansed me. So if I view pornography or any other, not just pornography, any other kind of lustful thing or thing that gives me problems in my life, I've sinned against God. Number 2, based on what we just wrote, because Paul said it's a sexual immorality, whatever form it is a sin against your own body. I've hurt me. I've sinned against me, and I'm hurting my body. So I've sinned against God. I've sinned against me. Now, number 3, since I'm married, I've sinned against my precious wife if I view that. I've sinned against her, and I've hurt her. Number 4, this is where Jesus went back and talked about our minds. If I view pornography, I have sinned against the person I'm viewing, and I'm committing adultery with them because I'm looking at them in a way I should not look at them. Boy, if that isn't a stopper, I don't know what is. I mean, and so God doesn't say that in a condemning way. Young people, he does not say that to hurt you, to punish you, to put you down. He's saying that to call you out and call you back to him. So likewise, let's say I wasn't married. I wasn't married to Ann or anybody, and I looked at pornography. I'd be sinning against 3 people, hurting 3, God, myself, and the person I'm viewing in the pornography. What should you do if you have been guilty of pornography or anything else the Lord is convicting in your heart that you may be real uncomfortable to tell anybody about? Well, there's good news. God will help you. God will forgive you. God will cleanse you. And God will deliver you. And he will take you through the process. All we have to do is pray. Confess. Aaron, where's Aaron? Or Darren. Darren said it at the beginning. If you're struggling, what should you do? Pray. That's what you should do. You should go to God and you should tell him and confess, and he will show. God will show up. Jesus will show up every time. What else should we do? Jesus told us what we should do. His own words, Matthew 18:8. He said, "Wherefore, if your hand or your foot offend thee, cut them off and cast them from thee. It is better for you to enter into life halt or maimed rather than having 2 hands and 2 feet and to be cast into everlasting fire." Now, Jesus didn't say literally cut your hand and your foot off. That's what's known as what we call a hyperbole. A hyperbole is an exaggerated statement to prove a point. But what he's saying, those things that so easily entangle, I'm going to use myself again, things like pornography or other that so easily entangle me and that I may desire, he's saying cut those off, throw them away from you, even though it makes you go through life like this, spiritually thinking, because you'll be better going through life like this without those things than to be happy and have everything you want and go to hell in a race car with no brakes. I mean, basically, that's what Jesus is telling us. But he's telling because he loves us and he wants to help us. I'm telling you, I want to help you. If you're caught in this pornography or anything that you know that you're trapped in, but I want you to grasp this, my friends. Again, you are not a bad person because you're in pornography or whatever, or say you've never been a Christian, you live in sin. You are not a bad. That doesn't make you bad. That just means you're a person that you're caught in some tough things and you need delivery from. And so when somebody comes to me, which I had a person, again, you don't know, they don't go to this church, they don't live anywhere around here. He said, "Kenny, I want to have breakfast with you." I said, "Fine." I thought we were just going to have breakfast before we even sat down. He says, "Kenny, I need to tell you, I've been addicted to pornography. I need freedom and I need help." So what did I do? I go, "What were you thinking? What's the matter with you?" He didn't need that. He was already hearing that in his life. And of course, I didn't say that. I said, "Well, here's what we're going to do. Here's how we're going to help you. Here's what we're going to do. We're going to talk to each other. We're going to pray for each other. We're going to talk to each other once a week and see how you're doing and see how you're getting along." He didn't need judgment. Nobody needs judgment. Nobody needs condemnation. Nobody needs, because when they're coming forward, they already know what they need and that they need Jesus. And we don't need judgment. And we don't need to give judgment, and we shouldn't give judgment. Like I said earlier, when the Lord has convicted me or shown things, young people in my life, he never did it in a harsh way. He never did say, "You're worthless." He never said, "What's the matter with you?" He never did say, "What were you thinking? Why did you?" He never did, never has, never will. He just draws you to him, to yourself. Darren, you guys want to come up? They're going to sing for us again that song, "You Say Who I Am." But I want to tell you something. Grief. A few weeks ago, the Lord gave me this message. And I said, "All right." And I said, "But I don't have any place to." I was going to Elk City. I already had what the Lord, what he wanted there. And I said, okay. 2 days later, Pastor Brian texted me, "Kenny, can you preach Sunday, August 4th? Because the Lord's saying, "I want you to talk about this subject." And I'm going to tell you, I'm going to be honest with you. Over the last 3 or 4 weeks, I've went back and forth with the Lord. I said, "No, I'm not going to do it. I don't want to do it because I don't want to hurt people. I don't want to even sound like I'm putting anybody down. Has nothing to do with it. It's all about help. That's what I want. I want you to be helped and find what God can find." I need to say this as well. I had another person that I knew. This was several years ago. Came to me, had excessive pornography use. Excessive. You just use your imagination.
He wanted to be free. Started him on a path. I got him the courage to go to his pastor where he went to church, and we got him in some counseling that deals with that, and he also got in a Celebrate Recovery at his church. 3 years later, one day, he called me and says, Kenny, I am finally free of pornography from all my life. He's my age. I am finally free. Man, I hooped and hollered. 1 year, 6 months later, he called me. He said, Kenny, I am still free, because he didn't live anywhere around. 1 year later, he goes, Kenny, I am still free. And you could hear this joy and this jubilation in his life. I mean, it was miraculous. 2 years later, I ran into him. Every time I didn't even say anything to him. He'd say it to me, first rattle out of the box. I am still free. But that process he went through, that 3-year process, we need to be really blunt and honest here. The Lord can take anything out of our life like that. He can do it. He's done it in my life. He's done several things in my life, but there's other things he hasn't. And like that man, I had to go through a process. And going through that process of finding that, I found out how I need to be more humble, more honest to God, less judgmental of others, be more loving, more kind, more caring. I learned that through that process. That man learned that through his process and how he can take the love of Jesus. So I'm here to tell you today, if you're in pornography or if you're caught up in anything and you want to make a decision today, I want to step away from it, and you go out and you go next week and you fall down and you do it or view it again, I don't care. I do care, but I don't care. I want you to get right back up. Ask the Lord, forgive me, put me right back on the path. I don't care if you have to do that every week till the day you die. If you have to ask the Lord Jesus Christ to save you, love you, forgive you, and every week, do it. He will do it. Why? He's the King of Kings. He's the King of the universe. He's the King of the world. But my friends, this is what you need to grasp more than anything else. He is the King of love. He is the King of compassion. He is the King of mercy. That's why he came to this earth, and that's what he died for, was for us to be healed and to be reconciled. Maybe before we sing, just to lighten it up just a little bit. I'm on the search committee for our pastor here, but I am not candidating for the position. And if I was, this probably wouldn't be the sermon to do it with. But I want to be honest with you. Yesterday morning in my office at home, I was going over this message again. I've been over it so many times. It wore me out. It was what the Lord kept changing, what he wanted me to do. I laid my head down on the desk and I told the Lord, I don't want to do it. I don't want to preach it. I don't want to bring it forth. Here's what I want you to hear. What he impressed on my mind then, it was as if he threw a warm blanket over my shoulders and he said, Kenny, I want you to, because I want to heal, I want to deliver, and I want to recover the people I love. So I said, doing it. So again, I hope you grasp how much the Lord loves you. He said these things in his word because he loves us. So like we do, if you want to come and pray about anything, just because you come up here, we're not thinking anything. If you want to come up here and pray by yourself, come to it. That's perfectly fine. It's perfectly all right. But if you would like to come forward and you would like to pray, there's Pastor Peg, Roy and Carol. There's others, people, Gene Spillman. Come up here. You're a woman. The women are going to pray with you. If you're men, I'll pray with you. Pastor Brian will pray with the men. Our main focus is we want you to get a hold of God and get a hold of that grace and that mercy and drive a stake today. And look, I'm sorry to go long, but I got to say one more thing about it. Let's say you make the decision today that you want to quit viewing pornography or doing other things like that. You can say, well, yeah, they looked at my computer. They can see that I looked at it yesterday.